Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the presentation. Happy Fisherman's Picnic. My name is Katie Clark. I'm Director of Operations at Historic Cook County. I am here this evening with Dennis Waldrop, Museum Manager and Archive Specialist, Leah Markson, Manager here at Johnson Heritage Post Art Gallery. Also here is Laura Dernberger-Grunow, our amazing new additional administrative assistant with Historic Cook County. Every year we do a presentation for Fisherman's Picnic. We love being a part of it. This year we were listening to the community who were asking for more stories of Cook County women, and we agree. This region is very distinctive, has a lot of history, and it's all too often that the stories of women are underrepresented. The women in this area have always had skills, tenacity, passion, with very full lives, and we want to tell more of those stories. So we hope this becomes a series that we can build upon, stories that matter, sharing the stories of Cook County women. Today's presentation is on the lives of 3 women spanning from 1894 to today. We have Olga Soderberg, a bit iconic in this town. She worked in the schools and was also instrumental in establishing the History Museum, building up not only the amazing collections, but strengthening the foundation of the organization itself. We have Alta McQuatters. She's been volunteering in this county her whole life and with Historic Cook County for over 25 years. She has spent her lifetime researching all those buried throughout Cook County in our cemeteries, manually documenting family trees, promoting genealogy, and she has a ton of great stories. And we have Sue Hennessy. She has enriched this community with her professional theater career. She has committed herself to building up not only the Playhouse as an organization, but a diverse community around it that supports it in many ways. So we have some stories to tell. Let's get into this. Please hold your questions until the end, and Dennis and Aaliyah will get to those. And so now I present Dennis Waldrop.
Thank you. And as Katie said, I'm Dennis Waldrop. I'm the manager at the museum. I've been with the Historical Society for 2 years now, and it is just a pleasure to get to know a community through a Historical Society. And so today we're going to be talking, or I will be talking about 2 women that have had a big influence on this community, but also the Historical Society. And I say that it's always takes one person to be somewhere at the right time to make something happen. And hopefully I'm going to show you how these 2 women had an impact on this area. Since working for the Historical Society, I've been impressed by how informative and well put together the museum is. And this is feedback that I've received from guests coming in that are from or other historical societies. And so that made me want to dig into the history of the museum and how did it get to be what it is. Because from my observation, from feedback from guests, it was evident that this was indeed a special place, just like Grand Marais is a special place. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2025, so I wanted to know what forces contributed to this entity. Past director Pat Zankman would always tell me Olga Soderberg was a major force that was made the museum what it is today. As I went through the archives, Olga's fingerprint was on so many artifacts, oral histories, events, publications, and initiatives. The only thing missing in my research was her personal life. And it seemed that she let her work and results speak for her existence. She remained single throughout her life and did not raise a family of her own, but she raised a community instead. Olga's father was Eric Gustav Soderberg, born in Sweden and immigrated to the United States when he was 18. He studied ministry and was a stone mason. Eric met Olga's mother, Agnes Hedlund, who was also born in Sweden in Minneapolis, and they were married in 1888. The Soderbergs are considered to be some of the earliest white settlers of Maple Hill. Olga was born on Christmas Day in 1894 on Maple Hill. She was born, grew up in, worked, died, and is buried in Cook County. In 1915, Olga graduated from Grand Marais High School, and that same year attended University Farm School in St. Paul, Minnesota for the summer. Eventually, she would go on to graduate from St. Cloud Teachers College in 1919 and teach at various schools throughout the state of Minnesota for the next 10 years. Eventually, she moved back to Grand Marais to start the next chapter of her professional life. And the pictures that we have here is her mother and her father. I love this picture of her father because I really think it catches the essence of who that man was, not as a person, but also as a fisherman. And this is a picture, a bird's eye view of Grand Marais from 1912, kind of showing what it looked like back then. Olga was very involved in the public schools throughout the area and eventually became superintendent of Cook County Schools in 1935. She held this position until 1943. During this time, she was responsible for standardizing textbooks, reports, awards, contests, artwork throughout the rural schools. In addition to superintendent, she also served as assistant librarian and eventually went on to become head librarian. Olga also taught study hall, and according to the Minnesota Children's Press book, Ice Cream and Fish, Olga was known as being strict. However, there seemed to be another side to Olga that many students and staff saw. We are fortunate enough to have Olga's actual yearbook from the year 1951. Throughout the book, signatures from students and staff, as well as words of affirmation towards her, can be found on the pages. Students and staff lovingly called her Sody, and most students praised her as a swell study hall teacher. There was one student who advised her not to be so hard on the kids next year. And then what we have here is Olga with Jim Nelson at the Old School Days Fair, and then Olga as a librarian, and this is a scan of her yearbook that I was able to pull some of these signatures out of. Olga was very involved with the Cook County Historical Society from 1937 to 1977, even serving as president 3 separate times. Her biggest challenge was possibly the acquisition of the current building the Cook County Museum is in today, a task she spent over 10 years working on. And as I went through the papers and research, I was amazed at her tenacity to stick with this project to try to make this happen. And so in the early 1950s, the Historical Society did not have a building for a museum. In fact, they had no building at all, but they needed one. One night, Olga prayed to God and asked if God would show her a building that the organization could use. Very soon after, Olga learned that the former lighthouse keeper's residence in Grand Marais was no longer being used. She contacted someone named Captain Gordon, who was living in the building, who told her that soon the federal government, the Coast Guard, would be deeming the building as surplus property and it would become available. A lot like what's going on right now with the Coast Guard station. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. And one major issue Olga ran into was that the federal government regulations for selling surplus property differed from the state of Minnesota regulations. Eventually, the building was promised to what was then Minnesota State. Sorry about that. I got to mess with something right here real quick. One major issue Olga ran into was that the federal government regulations for selling surplus property differed from the state of Minnesota regulations. Eventually, the building was promised to what was then Minnesota State University to use as a research building. The only way the Historical Society could possibly have a chance of securing the building was if MSU could pass on the chance to buy it. Olga wrote a letter to MSU explaining their need and want for a building and waited to hear back. And this is where it got a little bit tricky. Unfortunately, Olga ran into another hurdle when she learned that any entity who has a right to obtain a surplus building had to be a governmental entity as well as be a historical building itself. Exactly what's happening with the Coast Guard right now, Coast Guard Station. To appease the historical piece, a historian named Rob Riley from Grand Portage National Monument was called upon to create a report for the Cook County Historical Society, which he did. Once the building was deemed historical, MSU graciously offered to back out of the buying of the property so that the Historical Society could buy it instead. Because the Historical Society was not a governmental entity, the Cook County Board offered to buy the building and let the Historical Society utilize it as a museum. This is an arrangement that's still in place today. The museum is owned by the county. They let us run it for them. In 1966, the building was finally dedicated as a history museum. And then here, the pictures we have are at the dedication of the museum once it was deemed a historical site. And then this is a picture of the museum or the Marais home in 1904. And I'm so impressed that this house still is standing to this day. It just blows me away that craftsmanship and materials were so much better back then. And I think there's also a little bit of luck that it's still standing today too. In addition to obtaining the actual buildings for a museum, Olga was proactive about attaining funding for the organization. In 1964, Olga teamed up with a woman named Lucille Robinson in making authentic Voyager dolls. For 21 weeks, they learned how to make the dolls, which took 12 hours to make each. They sold the dolls for $10 at conventions in Minneapolis and other locations. Olga also had the foresight to try to establish the museum as a main entity in downtown Grand Marais. She was concerned that if the lots around the museum were sold, tall buildings would be constructed and obstruct the views of the town. To help raise money to buy the plots, or were now Drury Lane and World's Best Donuts, she wrote a letter to Jacob Astor Foundation, named after John Jacob Astor, an American businessman heavily involved with fur trade around the U.S., Grand Portage, and Grand Marais, to ask for money to purchase the surrounding lots. Ultimately, the Historical Society did not get the funds to buy the lots. And what we have here, this is at the museum, and I have to tell you that they're very well made. They're worth the $10, if not more. And so we still have a couple of them. And then the other picture is the museum with what is now Drury Lane Books. And this is what Olga referred to as the Marais estate, that this whole corner was the Marais property. And that her thought was, hey, if you build something on the corner right here, you're not going to be able to see the museum no more. Well, today, everyone knows where World's Best Donuts is at, but even locals do not know where the museum's at. So once again, somebody being in the right place at right time to do that, but she was not able to make that happen. And I mean no disrespect to the World's Best Donuts. They allow us to get a lot of traffic, so all their overflow comes to us, so we do appreciate it. And they keep me fed with donuts too. And the community very much considered Olga an asset above and beyond her work at the museum. She had a huge role in help planning activities and events in celebration of the Minnesota Centennial. In 1958, the Chamber of Commerce awarded her certificate of recognition and a gift of money for her Minnesota Centennial work. Olga wrote a musical piece titled The North Shore Drive, which played on Twin City radio stations. Another creative side to Olga showed up when she wrote her own book of poems titled Wise and Otherwise. In 1919, when Olga graduated from St. Cloud Teachers College, she was voted class poet. Some of Olga's favorite hobbies were poetry, songwriting, writing stories for children, and art. Her favorite books were Up From Slavery, an autobiography of Booker T. Washington, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and the Bible. She was also the first citizen of Cook County to be chosen as the Grand Marais Lion Club Citizen of the Year in 1971. That year it was Governor Wendell Harrison who presented the plaque to Olga, and in the notes of that, they noted that it was a Swede giving another Swede an award, so they were very proud of that fact. Another lasting testimony to the impression that Olga left on the community is a lake named after her just outside Superior National Forest, about 4 miles northwest of Tom Lake. Originally named Squaw Lake, the lake was renamed Olga Lake for her. And so what we have here is her song sheet from Minnesota's North Shore Drive. We have copies of this at the museum that we give out for free. So if you want to grab one and go back home and play it on your piano, I would love to get a recording of that, just to hear what the song sounds like. And then we also have 2 copies of her book, Wise and Otherwise. And that's a picture of her Citizen of the Year award. And then also there's a map showing Olga Lake, and it's right above Hoagland. So that was Olga, and then we're going to go on to Alta McQuatters. I'm a little concerned about doing Alta's because she's sitting in the audience right now. So with Olga, I can make stuff up, and maybe she ain't going to correct me, but I've got Alta here, and I've already let her read my script, so she's blessed everything. So hopefully I do you justice, Alta. Next up is Alta McQuatters. She has been an influential force within the Historical Society for years and still contributes to the ongoing collection and telling stories of this area. Alta is also a registered member of the Grand Portage Band of Ojibwe and works to collect stories and document activities, events, and history. She can be found every Saturday afternoon during the summer at Chippewa City Church in Grand Marais as a docent who loves to tell stories of her family and the history of the church. I was most impressed on how Alta raised a family and still played an active role in the community. And then some of her history, or family history, is Alta is a descendant of Tom Parent, who settled in Schroeder in 1895 and married Harriet Ann Briggs. Parent Lake and Parent Lake Road are named after the family. Alta's great-grandfather was Jim Giesick of Lutzen, who helped welcome new settlers to the area. Jim was so well loved that after he died, the school and the community shut down so that everyone could attend his funeral. Alta's grandfather was White Sky, who was a conservation officer for the area. White Sky Rock off of Caribou Lake is named after White Sky because he had a cabin on top of the rock. His father had a cabin across Caribou Lake. Now, White Sky died at the age of 22 of tuberculosis, 4 weeks before Alta's mom, Ruth, was born to his wife, Julia Walker. Julia was 8 months pregnant when White Sky died, and was taken out of the area by her sister to have the baby. The reason she had to leave was because if the government found out that White Sky had died, they would have taken Ruth away. This was a common practice that was done by the government to Native American families during this time. When Julia came back after having Ruth, Jim Giesick said, "This is my child, my grandchild, and she will stay in Lutzen." And I so thank Alta for this story, because a lot of times in our records, these stories are the ones that we don't talk about. So I know I've read about this in other parts of the country, but Alta confirmed, no, it was going up here too. And then, well, let me get back to this. Anyway, this is White Sky. Absolutely love that picture of him. He was just a handsome young man. Drawing of him. There is a picture taken of Caribou Lake from White Sky Rock. And then also here we have Jim Giesick with his 2 kids, White Sky and Cold Star, and then Jim Giesick's over to the left. Alta's mom, Ruth, grew up in Lutzen. Alta's father, Ernest, was born in Canada but came to Cook County area when he was 20 years old. Ernest was the first employee at Arrowhead Electric and ended up working there for 38 years. And Alta would go on to serve on the board of Arrowhead Electric in later years. Ruth had Alta in 1944, 3 weeks after a house tragically killed 4 of Alta's siblings. 2 older brothers were able to get out and survived. Alta shared with me that her family was very moved by what happened, and it affected her through her whole life because she was now deemed the brat. And so that kind of followed her on. And the photo on the right of the slide shows Alta with her Aunt Dora, who was the first woman president of Cook County. And I think that's a little telling there that you've got the first woman president of Cook County Historical Society and the future president of the society. And I absolutely love that picture. And then Alta would go on to volunteer for the Historical Society as well as serve 2 terms as president. Dora's granddaughter, Ruth Allard, a storyteller and history lover like Alta, wrote a book called Stories from Superior's Northern Shore, which you can find in the next room at the Johnson Heritage Post or at the History Museum. And again, as I described, the first woman president in Alta. And then this is the book that Ruth wrote, and we've got them out there for sale and also at the museum. Alta married Gary McQuatters in 1964, and Gary's here also. And Alta and Gary first met when they were young, as he would come up from Iowa to spend the summers at the mink farm where she lived and worked. Gary and Alta had 4 children, Brooke, Wade, Clint, and Gail. Sadly, their son Wade passed away when he was 26 years old. The couple also has 7 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. And I can tell you that Alta thinks that's the greatest achievement of her life, is the family that she raised. Alta went to school in Tofty and Lucin before eventually graduating from Grand Marais High School in 1962. After high school, Alta went to college to become a nurse, but left within a year because it wasn't a good fit. She shared with me it wasn't a good fit because she was pregnant at the time, and one day she was helping the doctor with a patient, and for some reason she passed out and fell on top of the patient. And afterwards the doctor said, "I don't think this is a good fit for you." So Alta took his advice and said, "I think you're right." But that was something she never shied away from on trying to try new things. Bear with me just a minute. Alta has many passions and hobbies, some of which include hunting, fishing, and trapping, or really just being outdoors, as well as craft work and reading. Alta shared that her claim to fame was that she could outshoot her brothers. Alta is very passionate about teaching kids skills such as hunting and fishing and trapping. She was heavily involved with the 4-H, where she volunteered for 17 years. And speaking of volunteering, Alta has been a huge asset to the Cook County Historical Society with her time and energy for over 25 years, serving twice as president and interim president as well. Currently, she's volunteering once a week during the summer at the Chippewa City Church. And so any Friday from 12 to 2, go by there, see her, talk to her. She's available for anybody. And also she loves sharing stories and also collecting stories. And if that wasn't enough, Alta is currently the secretary for the Lutzen Cemetery. A large way Alta has contributed to Cook County is by pouring hours and hours into mapping out local cemeteries so that those who are buried are not forgotten. One particular example is the cemetery at Chippewa City Church. In the early 1900s, a similar cemetery located between the church and the lake was moved across Highway 61 in order to make room for a road. Unfortunately, over time and after a large cleanup of the property, many of the grave markers were damaged, which left many of the grave sites unmarked. After learning about this decades later, and decided to map out the cemetery so the Native Americans buried there would always be remembered. She created a chart to help facilitate her research, which still hangs in the Chippewa City Church today. Alta welcomes anyone with information to come in and share. But it wasn't just Chippewa City Church that Alta has helped map out. She has spent a lot of research time in other Cook cemeteries as well. And this is the map of the cemetery that hangs at St. Francis Church now. And then, like I said, she's involved with just about every cemetery in town. And I think this is where I value Alta the most, is she has been very involved with documenting Native American stories. And that's something that we're missing a lot at the museum. And specifically oral stories and ones that she has found in old books but that have never been shared. Through her research, she has found a lot of information due to the fact that many of her friends and family members were the ones that wrote the stories down in the first place. From census records, new letters, scrapbooks, images, and letters, Alta has collected countless details and stories, and she continues to share these stories through presentations, writings, and interviews. And like I said, you can find her every Saturday afternoon during the summer at Chippewa City Church in Grand Marais as a docent who loves to tell a story about her family and the history of the church. Alta has brought in so many folders, binders, scrapbooks, pictures, and every chance I get, I start digitizing them and scanning them. It's just a wealth of knowledge that she's done. So I really, really appreciate her for that. And that's my 2 ladies that I wanted to let you know about. Now I'm going to introduce Aaliyah Markson and for Sue Hennessy.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. All right, guys, my name is Aaliyah Markson. I'm a little loud, so I'm gonna kind of work here figuring out where the mic needs to be. I am very, very excited to talk to you guys about Sue Hennessy. You guys know her as the current artistic and technical director of the Grand Marais Playhouse. She is deeply involved in every aspect of that company. And I want to cover her life and how she enriches the community up here. So Sue Hennessy was born in 1965 right here at the local hospital up in Cook County. She was born to Bud and Laverne Hennessy, their 7th and final child, so she's the baby of the family. Bud met Laverne in Brainerd, and they married in 1951 before they moved around a little bit before coming up here to Grand Marais and settling in Grand Marais in 1961. Bud started out as IGA's butcher, and then he eventually bought his own store, which right here you can see that's where Hungry Hippie Tacos is now. And here's a front view of that location. The store was called Bud's Airway Superette. And it got that name because when he bought it, it was a Fairway, which was a chain, and he didn't want to pay to be part of the chain. And the chain sued him, and so he knocked the F off and said, there you go, I'm Bud's Airway. And it stuck. Sue described herself as a very spiritual kid growing up. They were very involved in their spirituality and then the church community and performance through that venue. She also ran errands for Olga as a kid and would be paid in postage stamps, which her mom would then buy off of her for actual money. At 11, she had her first acting role with the Grand Marais Playhouse, which had opened in 1971. She played a forest imp in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. No lines, but she was hooked at that point. In 1984, Sue graduated high school and went off to college. She started at the University of Minnesota. She was deeply involved with marching band and was thinking of going the musical route, but her wanting to be around more friends and more of her peers brought her to Concordia University in Moorhead. And there was where she took her first real theater class. And as she said it to me, that was the end of that. Through that class and through the theater community, Sue also came in contact with her first gay community, and she came out shortly thereafter. And much of her identity and the things that she has brought to this community is deeply ingrained with her identifying as gay. For their senior thesis at the University of Moorhead, at Concordia at Moorhead, the theater group put on the play The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer, which is a semi-autographical play about Larry and the rise of AIDS in New York City in 1981 to 1984. And this was really big for that school. It was a religious school, it was in a conservative area. The dean took them aside and said, there are no gay people here, why are you doing this? And she said, I know of a couple. And that was also the performance that really impacted on her the value of social theater and the way that theater can communicate social experiences to people who have never touched on that before. After she graduated, a friend brought her out to New York City. They told her that if you work tech, you can get a theater job in New York City. If you're an actor, forget about it. But her friend hooked her up with a little sublet out there, and she started applying for any and every job she could. On Broadway, off Broadway, didn't matter. She was fresh out of college and had no idea how underqualified she was. That led to her getting a job at the Public Theater, which is this beautiful building here, and then later at Juilliard Performing Arts School. Now, at this time, the AIDS crisis is still going on, and there is a big push for equal rights for gay people in this country. To put this in perspective, this is the late 80s, early 90s, and the last state law in this country that criminalized homosexuality was not repealed until 2003. So Sue was deeply involved out there in the activism in New York City at the time, and it really was a hot spot. This is not a personal picture from Sue, but it is a photo from that time period, and it kind of gives you the idea of what the feeling was like there. She was out with her peers rallying, advocating, and performing activism 7 days a week. They would go out after work, they would go out on the weekends, it was everything. When they weren't actually marching or rallying, they were protecting one another as they wanted to go party at a gay bar, dance, and they would just walk the streets peacefully, no weapons, and just make sure everyone got home safe. She loved it out there, but it was exhausting. It's exhausting to have to face that much animosity constantly. And eventually she burned out and knew she wanted to come back to the Midwest. So she returned to Minneapolis in 1992 and got a job as the lead carpenter at the Guthrie Theater. While she was there, she also moonlighted at several other theaters throughout the cities down there. Then in 1998, Sue got a call from Dick Swanson, who at the time was the director of the Marais Playhouse. She had summers off from working at the Guthrie, and so she would come up and help out with productions up here on the summer and then go back to continue working at the Guthrie. However, at this time, her parents, who were still living here in their house, were needing more help at home and were concerned about their ability to stay in their home. So she chose to move home and caretake them. And Sue would end up caring for her parents for 17 years until they had both passed away. While she was up here, Sue started out working for the Playhouse part-time until the Playhouse needed a director, and Sue, being Sue, stepped up. It was 2000 when she performed her first musical. She hadn't directed since college and was very nervous about taking it on, but said, hey, let's do it, let's try. They put on The Little Shop of Horrors, and you'll remember for the 50th year, this is just a couple years ago, they performed that play again, and it was wonderful. And the woman who played Audrey reprised the role. She had actually was Audrey as a high school student originally. Now that original casting was kind of controversial at the time because she had never done a lead before. She had never sung like that. But Sue had seen her in auditions do a jazzy Star-Spangled Banner and was convinced. And that experience of uplifting a student and seeing them blossom and seeing them come into their own, Sue cited as her really falling in love with finding and uplifting potential in unexpected places, especially in students, seeing that spark and that confidence grow on stage. In 2002, no surprise, she was asked to take over as the director of the Marais Playhouse. So these are just a couple of the incredible things Sue has done. In 2010, she was the Cook County Citizen of the Year. There's a great picture on the end there. This is her friend Carrie Nath, who was one of the students that had also put on the play in Concordia Moorhead. And Sue has brought up Carrie, she's brought up fight directors, she's brought up Shakespeare experts. Sue uses her experience and her work history to enrich this community directly. She was also a recipient of the Joan Drury Award and is a organizer and supporter of Cook County Pride every year. Sue has said she wouldn't work in any other community theater. This is the only community theater for her. We get to be the recipients of that incredible wealth of knowledge and experience and passion because she chooses us. She chooses this community. Sue reads over 200 plays a year. She's produced over 100, and she never turns away anyone who wants to participate. That top left corner, The Wizard of Oz, that production had over 100 participants, most of whom were children. I was in the dressing room. It was madness. It was insane, but it was a blast. And it was really important to a lot of us as well. Since 2018, Sue has been really focused on promoting more theater education in the community. There really isn't any non-sports after-school activities right now for students, and she really wants the resources to be able to provide more theater classes, especially not just in acting, but also in writing, in production, in carpentry, all of the bits and pieces that go into putting on a theater production. In a 2014 survey, 76% of recipients in this community said that they wanted more theater, more shows. Only 60% weren't interested in helping. So we have this discrepancy. And I think a lot of people think that participating means you have to get on stage. But there's a lot that goes into a production, a lot of skills that are learned. There's costuming, set design, sound, we need musicians. Here you have a lovely image of these two kiddos. I think this was for The Lion King, possibly, or maybe it was Alice in Wonderland, making props. Getting on their hands and knees and directly contributing to their production. When we don't have those things, when we don't have musicians or producers or sound directors, Sue steps in. She does what needs to be done, and when she is no longer here, she doesn't have someone coming after her. So really quick, I just want to talk a little bit about why that matters. Why am I talking about Sue? Why does Sue's work bringing theater to Cook County matter? Theater teaches kids life skills, teaches adults life skills. I am up here, standing here, talking. I have the job that I have. I've been successful in the things that I've been successful in because of the theater experience that I got with Sue Hennessy. Theater combats hate. It builds empathy between people of different communities. It builds community, it teaches teamwork. Even maybe if you are not super big fan of your acting partner, you still have to support one another. You still have to be there. I've been in plays where I wasn't a huge fan, but we're still all there for each other on stage when the curtain comes up. Theater is also a tool to heal trauma. Leading trauma psychologist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk uses theater as a tool to help process and heal trauma both in children and adults. Working through emotion, learning your lines, all of those things are tools that help people heal. Theater also uplifts stories across geographical, cultural, and physical boundaries, not to mention across time. There is a reason that we still perform Shakespeare. Those plays are hundreds of years old, and we get to bring them to life. My last note is just, we need art. We need art in this community. We need art in this country right now. We need art, period. And Sue is the reason that we have that art here right now. I am going to end talking about Sue with a direct quote from her. So pardon me while I read this. In doing the work we do, we also change the community. We create an ensemble with people we see at the grocery store, at the post office, from a different school. Over 50 years of 4 or more plays a year, 200 ensembles going back to the community changed. Trusting, empathetic, connected, supported. Thanks, guys.
So, where do these stories come from? Like I said, being with the museum, the oral histories have given me more pleasure than anything. As you can tell, I'm not from this area. And it gives me a way to talk to people and get to know them. And something that I've always been impressed with is once I do an oral history, I walk away with a greater appreciation of that person because you get to hear about stuff you normally wouldn't do it. And the most common question I get, why do you want to talk to me? I don't have anything. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You have a lot. even if it's small, it's connecting with another story that helps us put together the big story. And I always tell people that are kind of hesitant, just imagine some of your descendants years and decades from now that are able to listen to your recorded voice and get to read your story, and that's invaluable. So either through oral histories, photos, clippings, anything that you can donate, everything in the museum's been donated, and books. I think I used every one of these to try to find out about Olga. She was a little hard to dig for because there wasn't a lot of personal stuff about her. And so just want to let you know, you're part of history. You guys are making history right now. And so if you have pictures to share, if you have photos and videos, please go on site. We've got a digital donation site to give those to us. At this time, we're trying to find more storage space for our collection. And so until then, we're just trying to take in stuff digitally. And so my advice to you, if you're sitting on stuff, do scan it, do digitize it, do save it, because it's not going to last forever.
All right, guys, right before we get to questions, I'm just going to run through a couple of more upcoming events if you liked this and you want to see more from us. Every first and last Thursday of every month, we do trivia up yonder, which is in the old Harbor Light. Tonight we're starting 7 to 9, normally it's 6 to 8. It's a lot of fun and you can win some great prizes, and we always include 2 Cook County historic questions. The current exhibit going on right in the room across the hall is 4 local artists, glasswood, paper, fiber. It's Bonnie Gay Hedstrom, Howard Hedstrom, Mary McDonald, and Jeff Morgan, which is 4 local creators that have come together to present this show, and it's spectacular. Saturday we have a blacksmithing demo over at Bolly's. It's really cool. You can see exactly how they used to do it. And it is going to be, Bolly's itself will be open tomorrow and Saturday 1 to 4. And then the demo will be Saturday 1 to 4. And then if you want to hear more from this guy, Dennis, you can join him for a harbor history tour over in front of the museum. It loops the harbor down by Artist Point and touches on all of the landmarks that you can see from there and some of those stories. It's a lot of fun. Last quick thing, guys, we are doing our annual heritage gathering, Lumberjack Bash, A Touch of Flannel. We're gonna have some food. Marco Good is gonna speak about his experiences logging up here in the community. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and tickets are on sale now at our website. If you guys want to take that information about how to share your stories that has our website on it, we have it on little printed papers over by the cookies. So grab a cookie and then grab a paper on your way out. Okay, do we have any questions?
Well, I'd like to say something.
Yes, please.
I'm Danny Helmerson. Olga was our librarian when I was in grade school. I said to Max, she was 60 years old when we were born. And in 1966, between 6th grade and 7th, she asked me to do a display for the museum. Electricity comes to Cook County. I was 12 years old, and I guess she knew me from the library. And so I made a cabin out of Lincoln logs that I had. And then she found somebody to rig up a light bulb to hang in it, and it was plugged in. And then I had a little plastic horse left over from my younger years. And it was up in that top window, you know, that looks out over Broadway. And I was so proud. And you know how she picked me. You know, she was really caring. She just loved kids. And she was about the same size as us kids, about that tall. And she was really a legend in the community. And then Alta, I got to know Alta through being at the museum, and she's always there. And what she knows about Chippewa City is just incredible. And the work that she's done is priceless. And I want to thank you, Alta.
Thank you, Dan.
thank you very much.
And Sue, we just, I don't want to leave.
And Sue,
out.
Sue,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
Now, she was 10 years younger than us, so. 11. But you had a good chance to get a Hennessy, and we had one in our class. But yeah, Sue is just the theater program, it's just incredible, and it's
And they have shows going on all weekend and all of next weekend. So if you want to go see the magic that they create, highly recommend. I'm going next weekend. Any other questions, guys, before we release you? Yes.
I just want to know where that church was that you're at.
oh, it's east of town.
It's just outside Grand Marais.
The Chippewa City Church, yeah. So if you get on the Highway 61 and you're driving out of town, you're gonna pass Subway, and then it's gonna be on your right there.
It's right past Subway.
And we have pamphlets. If you go out and turn left, we have a pamphlet on the Chippewa City Church that has the address right in there. I don't have it on the top of my head. Oh, actually,
Oh, address.
just you wait. Hey. Oh, just kidding. That doesn't have the address. Well, like I said, past Subway, it's gonna be on your right. You can't miss it.
It's a church.
Any other questions, guys? All right, thank you guys so much for showing up and supporting us. We really appreciate it.